How's everyone?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Okay.
First time at York College. I was telling Michael that this is the first time I've actually taken the E-train all the way to the last stop, and I've been living in New York for almost 50 years. So today's presentation is basically on how to re-engage students utilizing open source software. Software is a fairly high expense. What I basically want to talk about is how we can utilize the technology to re-engage students who may have been disenfranchised, unmotivated, and underperforming. I teach at LaGuardia. One of the schools I teach at is LaGuardia Community College, and working with community college students, some who are first-generation learners, some who are don't come from a whole lot of wealth and money. Many of the challenges that they have is how to basically, access the technology, but also the educational, cultural barriers that sometimes have been put in place that have held them back. So one of the things that I wanted to do when I took over control of the new media technology program a few years back was to utilize the technology in a way that basically pulled them back from the brink, to re-engage them, get them motivated, pull them back to the academic side of the fence. One of the problems with that is that access to technology is extremely expensive, particularly for our student base. So when we started to look at the hardware and software costs, the hardware costs started to come down. Students are, to a certain extent, able to, in many cases, to buy their laptops or acquire or utilize some from someplace. But the problem was always the software, particularly for students within new media, where the software suites can easily outstrip the price of the hardware, the laptops. So we wanted to talk about how to engage them, not only by infusing technology throughout the curriculum, but also making sure that the curriculum and the technology worked in a way that spoke to some of the cultural, some of the other barriers that have prevented students from succeeding. The first thing is to find out what motivates students, and to paraphrase the social scientists Deci and Ryan on their social determination theory, there's 3 motivation categories that basically students fall into. You have amotivated, extrinsically motivated, and intrinsically motivated. The amotivated students, unfortunately, is a lot of our student body sometimes, where basically they're not working on their best interests, they're not working towards their academic potential for a number of given reasons. Some might be that they don't feel worthy enough, some might be that they don't value the actual educational process. You have extrinsic motivation. Those are the students who can be reached or who can be motivated to do certain academic work, largely because of some type of reward or some fear of punishment. The reward might be getting an A, getting a good job. The fear might be not being successful and disappointing your family. The intrinsically motivated are the students that we all love to pull in. These are the ones who don't need any type of motivation whatsoever. They enjoy the learning process. They appreciate it for what it is. What we need to do is basically to counter this, is to move the students from that amotivational level all the way through to the intrinsic, from amotivational to intrinsic. And we do that by looking at what the students value, culturally, socially. What are the things that basically mean something to them? Then we basically then tie those interests into core academic skills. Skills that basically speak to the interests that they have. Build that into the curriculum. Then infuse the curriculum with the technology, which generally are the bells and whistles, which make students very happy, very engaged, that pulls them back. And then tie the curriculum to definitive career and life goals so that they can see the outcome of why the whole process is structured the way it is. That was one of the challenges I had when I was going through school, is that a lot of the things that teachers were teaching me didn't speak to my experience. I'm sitting in a class, I'm learning Chaucer, I'm reading Little Women. That really didn't speak to my own personal experience. So the ultimate goal is to move the students from the amotivational area down to intrinsic. I chose open source software as a way, or the technology as a way of infusing this into the program to make the lift, to remove a major barrier for students. The high-priced commercial software packages cost as much as most of the hardware, and that was a problem for students. Even if they were interested sometimes they couldn't afford it. Then we had the issue of software piracy. When I teach these type of issues in class, students automatically perk up because they love talking about this type of stuff, how to get things off of torrents, how to get things for free. But the issues are, you teach them the legalities and the issues behind it, and then that wasn't the best avenue to go. So what we did was we introduced open source software throughout our curriculum. Even when we taught the commercial software packages, which employers do use and do need, we wanted to make sure that we also gave them an alternative for the open source so that that wasn't a barrier any longer. That wasn't an excuse that they can use. Some of the packages that we've used throughout, one, for example, is this one here called Celtex. And this is probably one of the best software packages, and we use this in our writing to also infuse writing within the major as well. Celtex is a pre-production, screenwriting, storyboarding, shot scheduling. It's probably better than the commercial package, which is called Final Draft, which we use for screenwriting. And one of the reasons why this has taken off so well is because we could allow students to basically work through their ideas, to put their creative aspirations down on paper, to start to plan how to not only write the piece, but also how to do the pre-production so that there was an actual finished project when it was done. A lot of students have high hopes or high dreams to do things, but they don't have the necessary skills to move forward. So we tried to give them a software package that would allow them to plot the entire process throughout. Another piece of software that we use quite frequently is called Sigil. This allows students to start to craft documents, books, stories for e-readers. This is an open source EPUB book editor. It was developed by Google. It allows you to output books for any number of tablet devices. Totally free, available on all the major platforms. And that was another thing that we wanted to make sure is that all of the software that we use was available not only on Mac or PC, but they were cross-platform, even Unix for the real hardcore nerds within the program. Oh, this is moving very quick. Hold on. That's fine. I'll skip ahead to this one. Another area that we focused in on very heavily was the area of web development. And largely because this is one of the areas where students are starting to find a large number of jobs. This is where a number of opportunities are still available for them. So we wanted to make sure that they had some of the tools available also to craft and design sites. Whether they were going to basically be full-blown web developers or if it was just a basic skill that they wanted to bring under their belt. One of the ones that we use is Composer. This is kind of very entry-level, not one of the greatest. This I would basically recommend for students just starting out who are basically trying to get their feet wet with HTML and CSS. Once again, available on all the major platforms, but it's not the greatest. So what we are starting to move towards now is this one called Attendees Studio, which is a full IDE, integrated development environment that allows you to basically program HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Ruby, PHP, Python. So this is a fully immersed, fully designed, well-articulated package. It's open source, as I said before. What we're also seeing is that this also works very well for students looking to design web apps and mobile applications. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when I get to mobile games and design. So this is one of the major programs that we're working with. Another one is called Blue Griffin. Actually, I like Aptana much better. But I figured I'd leave this up as well so that people are aware. This is a little bit older, a little bit outdated, but it's still a substantial package. We integrate WordPress into our We integrate WordPress also throughout our program. Even though it's not an actual application, WordPress is a content management system that a lot of our web designers and developers basically learn to develop themes for. So even if they're not PHP programmers, one of the things that they're able to do is to develop the individual themes, customize it, and basically then hopefully resell their skills, whether or not they work for someone or whether or not they basically do freelance work to design small sites for independent companies and people. We have a number of graphics and drawing animation programs. I'm going to forward through this. One of the ones that we use quite frequently in lieu of Photoshop, which is a big part of our program, is called GIMP. Open source. It's been around for a number of years. Well received.
Has it grown? Has it grown over the years, or is it?
It has grown significantly, largely, especially when you look at the install base outside of the U.S., where you're starting to see a lot of the open source stuff take off is in areas of Europe, in areas of some of the developing countries, where the software packages from the commercial companies are just not an option. Light Zone is a kind of a photo manipulation. This is for more of the students in the photography department to basically manage their raw images. Inkscape is an open source answer to Adobe Illustrator, a vector-based program. Excellent. Not as good as Illustrator. I would say most of these are a little bit behind the commercial packages, maybe about a software release or two. Pencil Animation is a basic animation program, somewhat similar to Flash for creating 2D animation. Very simplified. I actually utilize this more when I teach some of the lower grades. I do some outside consulting with students in grade schools and so forth, and I usually use this program when I work with them rather than the one I'm going to show next, which is called Synfig Studio. This is a much stronger 2D animation program, very similar to Flash. It allows you to output files, not in the Swift format, which is basically becoming a little bit outdated on browsers, but it actually allows you to output movie files, which you can then upload to Vimeo, to YouTube, or any of the third-party video sites. Another area which is big for us is video and sound design. Many people have heard of this program called Audacity. Excellent audio recorder, great for podcasting, great for recording audio that you will then bring into your 2D animations. Very easy to learn, and it works pretty much on just about every laptop. This is a little bit more high-end. Phonegap, the music workstation. This is a full-blown music workstation, very similar in many ways to Pro Tools or some of the other programs like Apple's Logic or Digital Performer from Market a Unicorn. The one that I've come across that I've just started using is this one here from a music perspective. Great program, cross-platform, available on Windows and Linux. No Mac support as of yet. It's called Linux Multimedia Studio. If you've ever been interested in working in the field of music and you didn't have the money for Pro Tools, this is the program that I generally recommend to students at this point. When we start getting into the area of 3D animation, and a number of students have, and this is one of the programs, and this is one of the best open source programs that I've ever used. I've had students who were totally amotivated. When we introduce 3D animation, when we introduce cartooning, and then utilize these to kind of to the next step where we start talking about gaming and bringing your 3D models into a game environment, we're able to take students who are totally disconnected, and as we start to build up their skills and build up their self-confidence utilizing these programs, it becomes a much easier sell to get them into the aspect of gaming, and not only just from the aspect of playing, but from programming. So they go from basic graphic skills to now starting to think about how can I introduce physics into my games? How can I introduce geometry so that the arc of the ball or the arc of the monster that's chasing me is following a more natural path, and they realize that now they have to learn formulas to basically calculate these things. It doesn't just become, I'm teaching you these mathematics skills because this is what I think you need to know. Now you're tying this to the things that you actually value and the things that make sense within your world. And they're developing these skills without me having to push it on them. Blender is an excellent program for that. The only thing that I don't like about Blender is that the interface is a little bit non-traditional. So the learning curve can be a little steep initially, but once students get over that, it's great. Another program is called Lightworks. This used to be fully open source, but they're starting to kind of lock it down a little bit because it's been around for a number of years, and it's probably in many ways just as competent, just as strong as Final Cut or as Adobe Premiere. They offer, there's two versions. There's a totally free version that allows you to output 720p video, not full HD. You have to basically upgrade to the Pro version for the full HD, and they do offer educational discounts for the Pro version. Excellent program, though. The last area here, which is the one where that I generally love to pull students into, is the area of mobile apps and game development. LaGuardia is in the process of redesigning the new media program to offer a specific game and mobile app development package. We're kind of taking this in a three-pronged attack. We're basically teaching for iOS, we're teaching for Android, and in the area where I'm at, we're doing cross-platform, utilizing HTML, CSS, and third-party software, particularly a program called Phonegap, to basically allow students to use their web development skills and still get into the area of mobile application and game design. A great program for mapping out your applications is this one called the Pencil Project. It's a user interface GUI tool that basically allows you to scope out how your application should be designed before you actually build it. So this is where we start thinking or working with students to develop critical thinking patterns so that they start to learn how to plan before they begin to execute the actual development of the programs. There's a huge area right now in what they call user experience or user interface design. People who are coming out with these skills can command, in excess, just starting job, $50,000 and above. And there's a huge demand for this because of the number of tablet devices that we are basically seeing in the different screen sizes that we're working with. This is the Apple development code. Even though this is not open source, it is free. It's basically what Apple uses to develop natively within their for their applications. Phonegap is the open source mobile development framework that we're using. And basically what you have here is you have basically students who will work with HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, develop a web app, run it through Phonegap, which kind of encapsulates it, puts it into a package that can then run natively, not natively, excuse me, that can run, actually almost natively on these individual platforms. So you develop once and you're able to push the application out to multiple platforms, which is a little bit different if you're developing skills for just particularly the Apple environment or landscape that requires you to basically learn one specific language. If your application then becomes very successful, you then have to either learn Java or basically have someone else develop it in another language for you. This allows you to develop once and push out to multiple fields.
That's a very sophisticated program.
It is, but I mean, honestly, it uses the basic skills that we're developing for web application development: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript.
I mean, the program itself is doing a lot of sophisticated things. It's doing that conversion for you.
It's not even conversion as much as it's wrapping it in a platform that can then run on the tablet devices that are developed.
That's like Audacity.
The capacity?
No, Audacity. Audacity will do the same thing. It will give you whichever, it will save it as whichever file.
It'll output in different file formats. This is a little bit different though. The reason that and I have to basically couch this that Phonegap is probably best for not graphically intensive games or applications.
Yeah.
It doesn't run as fast as the native apps, but you can still, for some lower scaled applications, you can still put together something that's functional and then works. But there are trade-offs. I'm not going to tell you that it's as natively as fast as utilizing Swift or Objective-C for Apple or Java for the Android. The Android Development Studio, which you see right here, is kind of like Google's response to Apple's Xcode. Also free, also open source, and available on multiple platforms. But it does require you to have a command of Java. Those are some of the software packages that we've been using from an open source perspective for our program. My name is James Richardson. Some of you know me, some of you may not. All of the information that you've seen here, examples of student work, you can find on my website at jamesrichardson.net. I've done an extensive paper that also talks to many of the same issues on this in terms of re-engaging, particularly Black and Latino students who are most at risk, utilizing new media technology as a means to re-engage them into the educational process. And I would love for you to also take a look at that. If you have any questions, comments, if you need someone to basically talk to you about open source software that maybe work at your own individual institution, please feel free to reach me at james.richardson@cuny.edu. Thank you very much.